Everybody is cheerful. This morning, monks went out for the Pindapata, collecting alms in West Hill. We walked until the Rudy's house and back. We started walking at 9 o'clock and we arrived at her place in the back. It was about 10:30. So in the afternoon, again, around 1:30 or 2 o'clock, Jackie came along to plant the flowers, making in front of the temple become more colorful. Different varieties of colorful flowers been planted with the clay pots, which is blending into the environment around here. And this is probably the nicest, with the lots of blossom flowers around in this area at the moment. So very grateful for her contribution and dedication to make the front garden welcoming and colorful at the center. According to the teachings of the Buddha, it is suggested that someone who decorates around the public places, the result of that action normally brings their complexion more lovingly and beautiful. That's why there are the tradition of offering of flowers to the Buddha or to the Dhamma, to the Sangha, as making a merit and wishing that in the next life or following lives we may will have a beautiful complexions. So she has been working on that garden to make it more beautiful and colorful, attractive. And further on, she is also concentrating that attracts the butterflies. As we know that the butterfly is an important animal or insect for the garden. Meanwhile, Rudy again cleared the gable garden around the Buddha statue, so cutting the grass and making it more nicer. And that's simply because it is suggested that tomorrow evening onwards will be a bit of a rain and a cold coming soon for a couple of nights. And if the grass left uncut, then it will be growing quite fast and a bit difficult to cut it in a couple of days later. So that's why she come up and help cutting the grass around the gable end of the center, that making a tidy and a nicer. So this is the community center, or the center that all the members are participating in the various ways and volunteering to make the place more beautiful and also comfortable for people to come around and use it. And this is again the place that people come to learn and practice the Dhamma, as we know that the Dhamma is so important to practice and understand about it, an ability to comprehend the teachings of the Buddha, in the sense that the comprehending for the understanding all the latent defilements until that been fully removed from our hearts and minds. There are particularly 3 different latent defilements that normally invade our minds. The number 1 is called the raganusaya. This raganusaya is basically the desire to please our senses again and again. In a gross level, it may seem just a basic sensual pleasures, but in a practice of a meditation, what happens is that as our mind is settled onto the object, and the mind becomes resting and calm, at that moment there could be a series of a desire that arises, sometimes able to recognize, other time without able to recognize it. We will be planning and shorting any desired things. By the time when we realize that we have been thinking while we are meditating, it will have a long way away. There are many have been already shorted and many are on its way. In that case, again, whenever these thoughts arises, we need to be mindful with a strong samadhi ability to recognize them and noting and letting it go, rather than holding or exaggerating on that. The second latent defilement that normally arises due to the some form of the hard experiences, are called dukkha, the suffering, and it could be because of the physical suffering, or it could be because of the mental suffering. Whenever these are there, latent defilement that have been saved in our subconsciousness slowly pops out and disturbs in a negative way. So with that, then we will be developing the jealousy, we will be developing the envy, anger, hatred, and so on. And this also could be able to recognize as we are meditating, as our mind settles and gradually the mind begins to ponder on those negative thoughts, and series of a thinking of that negative thoughts again often leads to the anxious mind and causing a trouble mentally, and even that affects to the physical well-being too. So that's why again, any moment whenever these hatred arises in our mind while we are meditating and concentrating on the object, that moment the ability to recognize them and uprooting it one after another. And further on, there are some defilements that are very difficult to recognize, and without knowing it, it is there manifesting and also encouraging us to react or engage in that conversation or in that activity, which is again due to the neutral state of the mental feelings, and that's the reason why we will be having this neutral type of defilements, which is again often known as the avijjanusaya. The latent defilements that born out of not knowing what should be known, and that is again not just in this life, but year and lives after life, many lives been saved in our consciousness. So that's why the practice will help us to recognize them and ability to uproot one after another. And that is the seeing the Dhamma in a very detailed and a very deep state. Once we have understood in such a state, then we will become more mindful of our senses and the way we react, the way we speak, and the way we live our life. And that starts from waking up, going to toilet, and washing up, and every step that we are taking, and even when we are eating, we become mindful and become mindful of chewing and swallowing and so on. And each and every little detail of these defines the level of the level of the mind, that how much we have developed in our practice of a meditation. As someone who is a mindful person then would be mindfully acting in every action and become a non-forgetful, and will not be reacting quickly to any situation or any conditions that one is experiencing at that very moment. And that is knowing the Dhamma. And that is the real Dhamma. So that's why in a monastic life, there are two things that normally encouraged monks to be reflecting on that. The number one is called the Kaya Samaki, and the second one is the Vaci Samaki. And that again encouraging and also helping one another to develop more awareness and more mindfulness. The first one is Kaya Samaki, which means that physically presence during the breakfast or a lunchtime, or physically presence when the communal activity is going on. So with that, then again, that is the way to developing our patience and mindfulness, and as well as we are, as a monk, promoting the Dhamma. That being a monastics and monks and living in the same place, there is a harmony within, from the physical appearance of doing together. And this is also known as ways to propagate the Dhamma without teaching, but with action of being one and unity and harmony within the community. And the second is the Vaci Samaki, which is the verbal or a speech unity. And that's again normally defined by having a time together to do the chanting. And then chanting, each individuals are not chanting as they please, but chanting together in a melodious way. Same chanting. And this is again will help to develop this coherent and also a good relationship between monastics one another. There are monks and nuns, those who feel that chanting is regarded as the secondary and other works are the primary. In fact, other works should be the secondary, and the primary job should be this attending in front of the Buddha and paying respect to him with the recitation of all these Buddhist scriptures. And this recitation not only help us to remember the teachings of the Buddha, but also it helps to bring monastics together in a unison, and that promotes the harmony. So this is also a ways to promote the Dhamma to the other people to see that how monastics life's been living. So that's why similar way Buddhists also can practice it at homes, that at least of a one time, whether the lunch time or whether the breakfast time or whether the dinner time, inviting all family members together to have a food together. And with that, one another will feel closeness and connected and feel a family. that brings the harmony in the family. Whenever there are some other problems arises, then we'll be able to discuss and find the ways to deal with it. And if possible, setting up a time at least of a few moments, little bit of prayer or a recitation, some verses each day, like the story of a father who was always reciting that the life is uncertain, death is certain, and so on. And eventually when his own son died, and able to reflect and was not afflicted by that death, like that. So that's again a Vachi Samaki. You can also practice at your home by talking to one another at a certain period, certain time of the day, maybe before the bed or after, when you wake up, and that also promotes the harmony in the family. Whenever there are some dispute or misunderstanding, then we'll able to discuss in a sense that grown-up talk. So that's why the practice the Dhamma or the study the Dhamma is so important, to know that these are the principles, and not only knowing those principles but also able to apply in our daily life is essential. That's the Buddha was always encouraging, that not just the study, although study is very important to understand the path and the results of it, but again practice is more essential, so that we can understand practically these dhammas in our life, day-to-day life, so that we can uproot our defilements from a gross level to the very latent level of those defilements from our hearts and minds, and that will lead us to the attainment of Maggaphala, the path and fruition until the attainment of a Nibbana. So that's why it is quite important to understand that the center is here to learn the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma, to free our suffering and uprooting all these latent defilements from our hearts, from our consciousness, and building up the harmony within ourselves and the harmony within our community. So for this other reflection, and now we'll chant the Karaniya Metta Sutta and Jinapanjara Gatha, just a basic chanting for today. Karaneyamanta Gusalena Yantang Santang Padam Habisame Cha Sakoa Ujo Cha Sujo Cha Suvajo Cha Samudu Anati Ni Santo Sakoa Cha Suparo Cha Apake Cho Cha Sallahu Kavu De Santendri Cha Nipako Cha Apaka Pua Kulesu Ananugeto Nachako Tam Samachare Jayena Vinyo Apare Hopavata Yung Sukino Wakemino Hondu Sata Pavanta Sukhitata Yeke Jipana Bhuta Tita Sahavata Varawa Anavase Sahadika Vahye Mahanta Majimara Saka Anukathula Deta Va Eja Adeta Eja Dur Vasante Havidhore Bhuta Vasambhave Sivasa Sata Bhavanta Sukhitata Naparo Param Nikopetana Tipan ตกาตจินังกินจิพยาโรสนาปฏิกสัญญานัญญมัญญาสตุกเมชัยยมัตยะธานิยังปุตตัมมายุสาเอกปุตตมนุราเคเอวัมปิสัพพะนาสังภาวะเฮหะปริมาณังเมตัญจะสัมปโลกัสสมิงมานะสังภาวะเฮหะปริมาณังมุตตังกโตจติริยังจะอสัมภาธามเวรามสะปัฏฐังเตทังจรังเรเสนโตวาสยานโนยาวตาสวิกตเมโตเอตังสติงอเดทัยยะบรหมเมตวิหารัมมิตมาหุเดเทนจหานุปกัมมศีลวันดาสเนนะสัมปันโนกาเมสุวินัยยะเกทังนะหิชาตุกัปปะสัยยังพุนเรติเตชยาสนากตาปุตตาเจตวามารังสวาหานังจตุสัจจาสัพพังรัสเอปิปิมสุนราสภาตันหังกราทโยปุตตาอัตวิสตินายกาสเปปติติตามัยมาตะเกเตมุนิสราสีเสปติติโตมัยหังปุตโตธัมโมทวิโลจเนสังโฆปฏิทิโตมัยหาโมเรสัพพคุณากโรอัตเยอนุรุตโตสารีปุตโตจตาคิเนโกนทัญโยปิเตภากัสมิงโมกัลโนจวามะเกตาคิเนสัพเนมัยหังอาสุงอานันทราหุโลกาสปุจมาโมอุปาสงวามโสตะเกเกสตัวเปเทภากัสมิงสุริโยวัปปังคโรนิสิโนสิริสัมปันโนสุภิตัวมุนิปังคโวกุมารกาสปุเทโรมเหสิจิตวาตโกสุมัยวาดเนนิจังปเดตาสิกุณากโรปุณโนอังกุลิมาโลจะอุปาลินันดสิวะเลเทราปัญจหิเมชาตานาลาเตติลกามมเสสาสิติมหาเทราวิจิตาจินาสาวกาเอเตสิติมหาเทราจิตวันโตจิโนรสาชลันตาสีลเตเจนะหังกบังเกสุสันติตารัตนังปุระอาสิตาคิเนเมตสุตกังราจังกังปัจจโตอาสิมาอังคุลิมาลกังขันธโมระมริตัญจหาตานาติยสุตกะอากาเสชะทานังอาสิเสสะปะการสันติตาชินานาปรสังยุตตาสัตตาปะการลังกตาวาตเปตาดิสัญจตาภาหิรัญจตุปันตวะอาเสสะวินัยังยันตุหานันทจินเตจัสสาวะสะโตเมสกิจเจนะสัทธาสัมพุทธปัญจเรชินะปัญจรมัจจามิวิหารันตังมหิตเลสตาปัน Tumang sape te mahaburisa sapang cewa manto sukun surang kochina nupavena jito padavo dhammanupavena jitari sanggo Sanghanupavena jitantarayo asadhammanupava palito charami china panchareti Hantamayang padithanaka udesanadithanaka tayo panamasihi Mina punya kamena hopachaya kunutara Acariyo bakara jamada peta jayadaka Suriyo janti maharaja gunavandana rafica Brahma maharaja inda jaloka balaja devatan Yamo mita manosa jamachata verika vicha Sabe sata sukhi hontu punyani bhagatani men Sokhan jati vidhanten tuki pampa peta pumatang Imina punya kamena himina hudisena cha Khipahang sulape cewatanu padhana chetanang Ye santane hina dhammaya vani panato mamang Nasanto sapadhaye vayata chato phave phave Ojo cetang sati panya sale ko viryam hina Marala bandano ka sangkadun jabirihe sume Odhati pavaro nato dhammo nato varutamo Nato paceka buddho ca sangho nato taro mamang Peso dhamanu bhavena Maro ka sang labhantu ma Now this is time for the practice of a meditation, so sitting in a comfortable position and bringing your mind to the present moment here and now, adapting the object of a concentration, whether that is the breath or the abdomen or any other objects. Spending some time just to settle down, grounding yourself and then attaining certain stages of calmness. After that, opening up your senses and allowing things to happen and see, an ability to wisely reflect on those. So continue practicing until the end of the practice.